The evening air was thick with anticipation, carrying the soft scent of roses and the faint hum of a distant city. After 12 relentless years as a surgeon, countless nights spent in operating theaters, and endless hours sacrificing sleep for patients who would never know her name, tonight was meant to be hers. Tonight, she was not the doctor, the achiever, or the woman who silently bore the weight of expectations. Tonight, she was simply a wife celebrating a decade of love. Her 10th wedding anniversary had been planned meticulously, every detail chosen with care, the crystal chandeliers casting golden light across the grand hall, the floral arrangements cascading in perfect symmetry, the soft classical music floating in the background. Guests filled the room, colleagues who had seen her save lives, friends who had witnessed her laugh through exhaustion, and family who, at least in theory, shared in her joy. Yet, amid the celebration, there was a tension she could not ignore. Her sister stood across the room, her smile sharp, practiced, and false. There was something predatory in the way she moved, too deliberate, too controlled. A subtle glance here, a flicker of envy there, all masked under the guise of familial cheer. The protagonist's stomach twisted with a combination of irritation and unease. Her sister had always harbored jealousy, a quiet shadow that had accompanied every milestone in her life, her first award, her first house, her first recognition in the medical community. And tonight, she suspected, the jealousy would manifest once again. As the guests mingled, laughter echoing against the marble walls, the protagonist noticed the small, almost imperceptible gesture, her sister's fingers brushing the rim of a champagne glass, the glint of something dropped with the care of a seasoned conspirator. A chill ran down her spine, but it was accompanied not by fear, but by the calm, icy determination that came from years of controlled precision. She had seen betrayal before, in the war and in life, and she had learned that the best response was patience and cunning. She continued to smile, raising her glass as the host called everyone to attention. The room brightened with chatter, the silverware clinking in rhythm, the laughter swelling like waves. Her husband took her hand, his eyes shining with pride and love, and she returned his gaze with a quiet reassurance. He had no idea what was about to unfold. The clock ticked closer to the toast, and the moment of truth approached. She watched as her sister leaned forward, lips curling in that same confident, secretive smile, ready to execute her plan. The protagonist's heart did not pound in panic, it beat steadily, a metronome of resolve. With the grace of someone who had mastered countless precise movements in surgery, she maneuvered her own glass into her sister's path, executing a silent, perfect swap. No one noticed. The room erupted into laughter and applause as the glasses were raised. She joined in, her expression serene, concealing the storm within. She felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. Tonight, the betrayal would not define her. Tonight, justice would be silent but unforgettable. And as the glasses clinked, the protagonist allowed herself a single thought: the night had only just begun. The guests' laughter filled the hall, a warm, jubilant sound that contrasted sharply with the cold calculation running through her mind. Each clink of the champagne glasses seemed louder than the last, echoing like a warning that the moment of reckoning was near. She held her glass firmly, her fingers brushing the delicate stem, aware that the sip she would take, or rather, the sip her sister would take, would shift the balance of the evening entirely. Her sister's smile remained fixed, confident and sly, a mask that could fool anyone else in the room. But the protagonist saw through it. She remembered the subtle betrayals of years past, the whispers behind her back at family gatherings, the petty manipulations during celebrations, the small yet pointed ways her sister tried to undermine her achievements. Those moments had stung, yes, but they had also taught her patience, awareness, and the value of quiet retribution. Tonight, all of it would culminate in a single, controlled act of poetic justice. As the host raised his glass, the room erupted into cheers. The protagonist mirrored the motion flawlessly, her eyes scanning the crowd without betraying a hint of the storm she had orchestrated. She caught sight of her sister's hand, trembling slightly as it lifted toward her lips. For a heartbeat, a sliver of uncertainty flashed across her sister's face, but she quickly masked it with bravado. The protagonist allowed herself a quiet, almost imperceptible smile. Time seemed to stretch. Conversations slowed, laughter dulled, and a subtle shift rippled through the air, like the calm before a storm. She watched her sister tilt the glass, already hers, now containing the intended sabotage, and sip delicately. Her own heart remained steady, a surgeon's control flowing through her veins, keeping panic at bay. This was no reckless act, it was precision, executed flawlessly. Then, the first signs began. Her sister's smile faltered. Her grip on the glass tightened, fingers whitening, as a sudden unease spread across her features. Guests began to murmur, confusion flickering in their eyes. One by one, they noticed it, a cough, a wince, a sudden pause mid-laughter. The music, once a cheerful background hum, seemed distant, almost muffled. The room's energy shifted, a ripple of uncertainty coursing through the gathered crowd. The protagonist remained still, calm, her gaze unwavering. She could feel every second, each subtle movement magnified in her awareness. Her husband glanced at her, his brow furrowed, sensing something was amiss, yet trusting her judgment implicitly. Slowly, realization began to dawn across the room, this was no accident. Conversations halted, glasses were set down, and eyes turned toward her sister, whose confident mask was crumbling under the weight of exposure. It was a moment of quiet triumph. No words were necessary, the scene spoke for itself. Her sister's envy, carefully hidden for years, had been laid bare in front of everyone she had hoped to impress. The protagonist's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the panic unfolding around her. She had allowed the betrayal to meet its match, and now the consequences rippled outward, visible to all, undeniable and just. The chapter closes on a chilling silence. The grand hall, once vibrant with celebration, now trembled under the weight of stunned realization. Guests looked around in shock, whispers spreading like wildfire. And at the center, the protagonist stood composed, eyes steady, heart unshaken, knowing that her quiet act of justice had changed everything. The grand hall was thick with a stunned silence, broken only by the occasional cough or clatter of a glass set too hastily on the table. The guests, once jovial and carefree, now exchanged anxious glances, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. Some clutched their stomachs, others bent forward, catching their breath as confusion rippled through the room. At the center of it all stood her sister, once poised and self-assured, now pale, trembling, and utterly exposed. The protagonist watched quietly, her hands resting lightly on the stem of her untouched glass. She could feel the weight of every gaze, the realization slowly settling in across the room. Her sister's plan, devious, calculated, and cruel, had not only failed but had spectacularly backfired. The sister who had once orchestrated subtle betrayals with smug satisfaction was now the epicenter of humiliation. It was a scene that could have unfolded in slow motion, the poetic justice unfolding exactly as it had been intended. With measured grace, she stepped forward. Every movement was deliberate, every expression carefully controlled. She did not shout, nor did she point accusingly. Instead, she allowed her calm authority to dominate the space. "I saw what you did," she said softly, but with a clarity and precision that cut through the tension. "I noticed the moment you thought no one was paying attention." Her voice, gentle yet firm, carried an undeniable weight, commanding attention without demanding it. Her sister's eyes widened, searching the crowd for allies, for any hint of escape, but found only disbelief mirrored back. Whispers spread like wildfire as the guests began to piece together the truth. The glass that had been intended as a weapon had been switched, silently, invisibly, by the very person it had targeted. The room's energy shifted again, not panic, this time, but awe. They had witnessed a subtle, brilliant act of retribution, executed with calm precision and unwavering control. The protagonist continued, not with anger but with clarity. She recounted, calmly and without embellishment, the small signs she had noticed, the hand, the flicker of movement, the barely perceptible smirk. She allowed the story to unfold naturally, letting the evidence speak for itself. The contrast between her composed demeanor and her sister's rising panic could not have been more stark. In that moment, the truth did not require embellishment, it shone on its own. Guests murmured in admiration, some leaning closer to whisper their astonishment. Her husband remained at her side, pride and amazement reflected in his eyes. Even those who had been casual observers recognized the skill, the intelligence, and the poise required to navigate such treachery without faltering. The sister, meanwhile, could do nothing but shrink under the weight of exposure. She had underestimated the quiet strength of someone who had lived years in the operating room, mastering patience, precision, and control. By the end of the chapter, the room had settled into a tense calm. Her sister was humiliated but alive, the consequences of envy laid bare for all to witness. And the protagonist, standing tall and composed, had not only defended herself but had reclaimed her dignity in front of everyone who mattered. Justice had been served, quiet but undeniable, a testament to the power of observation, restraint, and intelligence. The chapter closes with a single thought echoing in her mind: some victories need no applause, they only require patience, clarity, and the courage to act when the moment comes. The hall was quieter now, the chaos of the earlier moments replaced by a tense, almost reverent hush. Guests lingered in small clusters, their voices lowered to whispers as they processed what had just unfolded. Some were shaking their heads in disbelief, others exchanging wide-eyed glances, and yet all of them carried the same thought: they had witnessed something extraordinary. At the center of it all, the protagonist stood composed, her posture relaxed but her presence commanding. She had turned what could have been humiliation into a quiet, undeniable victory. Her sister remained near the edge of the room, her once confident demeanor replaced with shame and regret. The protagonist allowed herself a moment to observe her. She didn't gloat, there was no need. Her sister had already absorbed the consequences of her envy, exposed in front of everyone she hoped to impress. Years of subtle manipulation, small betrayals, and unspoken rivalries had come to a head tonight, and justice had been served not with anger, but with calm intelligence. Her husband finally reached her side, taking her hand with a mixture of awe and admiration. He whispered a quiet word of praise, one that spoke volumes without needing to echo through the hall. In that touch, she felt the full weight of her accomplishment, not the revenge itself, but the restraint, the strategy, the patience that had allowed her to navigate a dangerous situation flawlessly. She smiled, a soft, private smile, knowing she had acted with integrity while still protecting herself and everyone around her. She walked slowly through the room, greeting guests with gentle nods and composed words, each interaction reinforcing the subtle authority she now commanded. People who had once overlooked her brilliance, who had taken her kindness for granted, now looked at her with newfound respect. She realized, in that moment, that revenge was not about humiliation or anger, it was about reclaiming control, about asserting her worth in a world that often tried to diminish it. Later, after the guests had begun to leave and the room had emptied of its earlier energy, she found herself alone for a moment. Standing by the large windows of the grand hall, she gazed out at the city skyline, its lights twinkling like stars reflected in glass. She let herself breathe, reflecting on the events of the evening. She thought about her sister, about the envy that had driven her to sabotage, and about the years of suppressed frustration she herself had carried. Tonight had been a turning point, not just in the family dynamic, but in her own understanding of strength. She recognized, finally, that true empowerment was not loud or vengeful, it was quiet, controlled, and precise. It was knowing when to act and when to wait. It was protecting oneself without losing integrity, asserting one's worth without cruelty. And as she stood there, feeling the calm settle over her like a warm blanket, she allowed herself a rare moment of peace. The night ended with a soft, contented sigh. She returned to her husband, taking his arm, and together they left the grand hall. The city lights reflected not just in the windows, but in her mind as well, reminders of the resilience, intelligence, and quiet power she had carried all along. She smiled once more, thinking, some victories are silent, but their echo lasts a lifetime. And with that, she knew she had not only survived betrayal, she had transcended it.